The battle between Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and House Republicans is brewing even more this morning. Thursday, the Manhattan DA's office responded to a letter sent by House Republicans, which requested additional information on the ongoing alleged hush money case in New York that involves former President Trump and adult film star Stormy Daniels. The letter was written by Leslie Dubeck, Alvin Bragg's general counsel, and it reads in part that the letter's requests are an unlawful incursion into New York's sovereignty. The New York grand jury is likely to decide whether or not they will indict the former president, vote to indict in the case at some point next week. The former president thought that would happen on Tuesday. That day came and went. Joining us now to discuss this, Bernarda Villalona, legal analyst, criminal defense attorney, and former prosecutor. Always good to have you on. Thank you for being here. So the DA is pushing back on the GOP investigation now. Alvin Bragg calls it unlawful. Legally, is it?
It is. It's absolutely unlawful. Let's not forget that we're dealing with two different jurisdictions. The district attorney for New York County is a state jurisdiction. And when we're talking about the GOP, we're talking about federal. So we're talking about two different jurisdictions, two different sovereignties, and they're not allowed to intervene with each other. Aside from that, it is still premature anyway, because there hasn't been an indictment and there hasn't been an arrest for the GOP to try to get involved into what's going on in state matters.
Okay, so I want to play for people at home. One of the members of the House Judiciary Committee who signed that letter to the New York DA's office about the probe into DA Bragg. I want folks to listen to this. Did you sign this letter? Are you part of the group that wants Alvin Bragg investigated?
Yes, I am.
And why?
Because, he said in his statement there that you just read that this is an unprecedented inquiry. Well, this is an unprecedented investigation that he's attempting to do on the former president, who is a presidential candidate for 2024. Why would you do something like this, especially from a district attorney who's downlisted felonies, over half of them in his jurisdiction, down to misdemeanors, and now he wants to take a misdemeanor up to a felony? Very inconsistent.
So help us read between the lines here, because I asked him as a follow-up, is this about a pursuit of the facts or a dispute of the facts? They would know what they have authority to do in this case. So why do this? What's the point? And if they're criticizing it's a personal attack against Trump from the New York DA, is it not also a personal attack against the DA as they try to investigate?
Absolutely, 100%. You just hit the nail on the head. This is all about politics when it comes to the GOP and the Republican Party. Let's not forget that New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg was elected by New York County to be the district attorney and to prosecute any crimes that occur within New York County. And with that, having sole jurisdiction as to making determinations about crimes that are committed in New York State. He is doing his job by investigating a crime. That is exactly what he was elected to do. In terms of the GOP getting involved, we know that it's all politics. And just how Alvin Bragg stated in his letter, they are intervening. That is after Donald Trump asked them to intervene on his behalf. So they are not doing this in the pursuit of justice, but rather to do it for politics' sake.
Is it more about controlling the narrative at this point? Is it Donald Trump trying to predict when he would be indicted? Is it about the DA trying to pick a day and doing so, whether or not they're going to arrest him? Is it about the politics on both sides trying to control what's being said and why?
So we're talking about two different things. Of course, when it comes to Donald Trump, it comes about controlling the narrative and also fundraising for anything that comes up, because anything that comes up in the news, anything political, he always throws that little stamp of, by the way, contribute to my campaign. When it comes to the New York District Attorney, I used to be a former prosecutor for 16 years, and I have presented hundreds of cases into the grand jury. It is a process. It's a process of presenting evidence. It's a process of having conversations and making determinations as to when is the right time and what information to put forward in front of this grand jury to make sure that you are following proper protocol, because you run the risk that if you do something afoul in the grand jury, that a New York State Supreme Court judge can review what was done in the grand jury and can dismiss your indictment. So Alvin Bragg is doing what he needs to do to make sure that it is a fair presentation and that the things are being done correctly.
Donald Trump says no crime was committed. Bernarda, the longer that this drags out, is there still a chance that the former president will not be indicted?
No, not at all. You got to think it's being presented to the grand jury. The evidence is being presented. The witnesses are being put forward. It is up to DA Bragg to determine at what point he's going to present these charges to be voted on these grand jurors who've heard the evidence. It takes time. You got to think this incident didn't take place just a year or 2 years ago. We're talking about a few years ago. So it's up to the DA Bragg, following also the protocol of when the statute of limitation is to present these type of charges, because that's what he has hanging over him, to make sure there is a deadline of when a grand jury can vote out these charges and he can pursue a prosecution. It will happen. It's just a matter of when.
Bernarda, I want to get you on this real quickly before we run out of time. There is this separate investigation, the DOJ looking into the classified documents that the FBI seized at Mar-a-Lago. Evan Corcoran, Trump's attorney, will testify in front of a grand jury today. Rare to have attorney-client privilege punctured in this way in this case. How do you view it?
Oh my God, this is very rare. You got to think Donald Trump should be worried about this because Evan Corcoran was his attorney. Evan Corcoran had many conversations with Donald Trump, especially when we're talking about getting legal advice. So the question for us, for the grand jury to determine in the DOJ investigation is one, whether Corcoran was aware of what was going on and what was a co-conspirator, or whether Donald Trump used his own attorney to assist them in committing these crimes. Corcoran knows where the bodies are buried, and I would be very nervous if I was Donald Trump, because there are writings and conversations that can come forward in front of this grand jury, especially since there's no attorney-client privilege anymore.
Bernarda Villalona, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.